Original. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped off the plane in Guangzhou. My grandfather's driver, Mr. Lei, was supposed to be waiting. He never missed an airport pickup in 20 years, but this time, no sign of him. Instead, a different car idled by the curb. A black Audi with tinted windows. My father's favorite brand. Paraphrased. The moment I got off the plane in Guangzhou, I had a bad feeling. I expected to see Mr. Le, my grandfather's driver, waiting for me. In 2 decades, he had never failed to be there for an airport pickup, yet he was nowhere to be found. A different vehicle was waiting at the curb, though a black Audi with tinted windows, the same kind my father liked. Original. The driver, a stone-faced young man in a suit, stepped forward. "Your parents sent me," he said in Mandarin. I hadn't told them I was coming. My pulse ticked up, but I forced a smile, playing along. Of course. How thoughtful of them. Paraphrased. A young man with a suit and an unreadable expression approached me. In Mandarin, he said, "Your parents sent me. I hadn't let them know I was arriving." My heart began to beat faster, but I hid my anxiety with a fake smile and acted as if I expected him. "Oh, how kind of them," I replied. Original. The ride was silent, but tension coiled in my gut like a loaded spring. Guangzhou's skyline blurred past, neon reflecting off the rain-slick streets. I gripped my phone, half tempted to text my lawyer, but something told me to wait. Paraphrased. The drive was quiet, but a sense of dread tightened in my stomach. The city's neon-lit skyline passed in a blur, its lights reflecting on the wet streets. I held my phone tightly, wanting to contact my lawyer, but I felt I should hold off for now. Original. When we pulled up to my family's old home, a 3-story villa in USEU, I expected warmth, nostalgia. Instead, it felt like stepping into an ambush. My mother sat at the dining table, sifting through paperwork, like this was any other evening. My father stood by the window, swirling a glass of scotch. Neither of them looked surprised to see me. Paraphrased, arriving at the old family villa in UXU, a 3-story house, I hoped to feel a sense of warmth and familiarity. Instead, it felt like a trap. My mother was at the dining table, calmly, looking through documents as if it were a typical night. My father was at the window, slowly swirling a glass of scotch. Neither of them seemed surprised that I was there. Original. "We need to talk," I said, skipping the pleasantries. My mother exhaled, setting down her pen. "We figured you'd show up sooner or later." I glanced around. "Where's Grandpa's factory? Why is it shut down?" My father sipped his drink. "Because it's no longer ours." His words hit like a gut punch. Paraphrased. "We need to talk," I stated, bypassing any small talk. With a sigh, my mother put down her pen. "We expected you'd turn up eventually." I looked around the room. "Why is Grandpa's factory closed? What happened to it?" My father took a sip of his drink. "We don't own it anymore," he answered, and his words were a shock. Original. I stared at them, waiting for the joke, the explanation, but there was nothing. "You sold it," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. My mother barely blinked. "Yes, months ago." "You were busy in New York?" So we handled it like they had thrown away an old pair of shoes. Paraphrased, I looked at them, waiting for a punchline or an explanation, but there was none. You sold it? I asked, my voice unintentionally harsh. My mother didn't react. Yes, we did. Several months ago. Since you were busy in New York, we took care of it. Made it sound like it was disposable, original. I took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. It wasn't yours to sell. Technically, it was, my father said smoothly. You inherited it, but we managed the business. It was failing. We did what was best. I forced a laugh. Best for who? No answer. Paraphrased, I took a deep breath, attempting to control my anger. You had no right to sell it, my father replied, calmly. Technically, we did. You may have inherited it, but we were running the company. It was failing, and we did what was necessary. For whom? I asked with a bitter laugh. He didn't respond. Original. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my grandfather's will, the original copy, notarized and sealed. I had read it a dozen times. My name was on every asset. My name was on the company. There was no clause allowing them to act on my behalf. I tossed the paper onto the table. This says otherwise. My mother barely glanced at it. You should speak to our lawyer. Paraphrased, I pulled my grandfather's will out of my pocket. It was the sealed, original, and notarized copy. I had read it countless times. My name was listed as the heir to every asset, including the company. The document had no language allowing them to sell it for me. I threw the paper onto the table. This document contradicts what you're saying. My mother barely looked at it. You should consult with our lawyer, she said. Original. There it was. The deflection, the corporate maneuvering. I leaned in, voice low. Fine. I'll talk to your lawyer, but I hope you realize something. If what you did was illegal, you're both going to lose a hell of a lot more than the factory. My father's expression darkened, but he said nothing. I turned on my heel, grabbed my coat, and walked out. The black Audi was still waiting, but this time I wasn't getting in. I had my own plans. Paraphrased. That was it. They were trying to divert the issue with legal games. I leaned closer and said in a low voice, I'll talk to your lawyer, but you should know that if what you did was against the law, you both stand to lose much more than the factory. My father's face tightened, but he remained silent. I spun around, grabbed my coat, and left. The black Audi was still there, but I wasn't getting in this time. I had a different strategy in mind. Original, and my lawyer had just found something they hadn't expected. I didn't go to their lawyer. Not yet. That would have been playing their game, and I had no intention of walking into a rigged fight. Instead, I went to see Mr. La. He was more than just my grandfather's driver. He was the closest thing to a confidant my grandfather ever had. If anyone knew what had really happened to the factory, it was him. Paraphrased, my lawyer had just uncovered a detail they were not expecting. I didn't go to my parents' lawyer right away, as that would have been falling for their trap, and I refused to get into a rigged battle. Instead, I went to find Mr. Lay. He was not only my grandfather's driver, but also his closest confidant. If anyone knew the true story behind the factory, it would be him. Original, his apartment was in an older part of Guangzhou, tucked away in a quiet alley lined with lanterns. When he opened the door, his eyes widened. "I knew you would come," he said, stepping aside, "but I thought it would be sooner." That hit me like a slap. "You knew," Mr. Le sighed, gesturing for me to sit. His place was small but spotless. Framed photos of my grandfather lined the walls. Paraphrased, his apartment was located in an older, quiet, lantern-lit alley in Guangzhou. When he opened the door, his eyes widened. "I knew you'd show up," he said, moving to the side, "but I thought you'd be here earlier." I was stunned. "You knew?" Mr. Le sighed and motioned for me to sit. His apartment was tiny but immaculate, and photos of my grandfather were all over the walls. Original. I knew something was wrong the day they announced the sale. Your parents fired half the staff before the papers were even signed. No severance. No explanation. I clenched my jaw. They made it seem like the business was failing. "That's what they told the workers," he continued, "but that wasn't true." My chest tightened. "How do you know?" Paraphrased. "The day they announced the sale, I knew something was wrong. Your parents fired half of the employees without any warning or severance, even before the documents were signed." I tightened my jaw. "They said the company was going bankrupt," he continued. "That's what they told the workers, but it was a lie." My heart sank. "How can you be sure?" Original. Mr. Le gave me a long look before standing up and crossing the room. He opened a cabinet, pulled out an old metal lockbox, and set it on the table between us. The key was already in the lock. He turned it. Inside was a stack of documents. "I saved what I could," he said, handing me a folder. "Financial records, orders." The factory was turning a profit even in its final months. Paraphrased, Mr. Le looked at me for a long time, then got up and went across the room. He took an old metal lockbox from a cabinet and placed it on the table between us. The key was in the lock. He turned it, revealing a pile of documents inside. "I saved whatever I could," he said, giving me a folder. "These are financial records and orders." The factory was still profitable, even in its last few months. Original. I flipped through the pages, my stomach sinking with every number. The factory hadn't been dying. It had been thriving. "They wanted to sell it before you could take control," Mr. Le said quietly. I gritted my teeth. My parents hadn't just sold my inheritance. They had lied to my face about why DARAPHRASED. I looked through the documents, my stomach churning at each number. The factory wasn't failing. It was flourishing. "They sold it to prevent you from taking over," Mr. Le stated softly. I clenched my teeth. My parents didn't just sell what was meant for me. They lied directly to me about the reason. "Original? Who bought it?" I asked. Mr. Le hesitated. "That's where things get complicated." I glanced up. "What do you mean?" He handed me another paper. This one was different. A contract, not for the sale, but for a partnership. I scanned the names, and then I saw it. My father hadn't just sold the business. He had sold it to someone he owed money to. A name I recognized instantly. A name I never expected, a name that made my blood run cold. Paraphrased. Who was the buyer? I inquired. Mr. Le paused. It's a bit more complicated than that. I looked at him. What do you mean? He gave me another document. Not a sale contract, but a partnership agreement. As I scanned the names, I saw it. My father hadn't simply sold the business. He had sold it to a man he was in debt to. It was a name I immediately recognized and never expected. A name that chilled me to the bone. Original. I stood up, gripping the paper. I need to see this lawyer, I said. But now it wasn't just about taking back my factory. It was about finding out what the hell my father had got himself into. I didn't sleep that night. My mind spun, piecing together the betrayal like a shattered mirror. My parents hadn't just stolen from me. They had used my grandfather's life's work to settle a debt. Paraphrased. I got up, clutching the paper. I have to talk to this lawyer, I declared. But now it wasn't just about reclaiming the factory. It was about discovering what my father had gotten himself into. I couldn't sleep that night, my mind racing as I tried to put together the pieces of the betrayal. My parents had done more than just steal from me. They had used my grandfather's legacy to pay off a debt. Original, and the name on that contract, Jiang Wei, a businessman on paper, a shark in reality. He didn't buy companies. He swallowed them. Then he gutted them for parts, rebranding the carcasses under his ever-growing empire. He didn't just want my grandfather's factory. He wanted his legacy, and my father had given it to him. Paraphrased, the name on the contract was Jiang Wei. He was a businessman in name, but in truth, he was a predator. He didn't just purchase companies. He devoured them, stripping them for assets and rebranding them for his expanding business. He wasn't after my grandfather's factory. He was after his legacy. And my father had handed it to him. Original by morning. I was sitting across from my parents' lawyer in a glass-walled office in the heart of Guangzhou. His name was Mr. Sun, and he had the slimy confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. He folded his hands on the table, smiling. Your parents informed me you had concerns. Paraphrased. The next morning, I was in a glass-walled office in downtown Guangzhou, facing my parents' lawyer. His name was Mr. Sun, and he had the smug assurance of a man who believed he had already won. He smiled, placing his hands on the table. Your parents told me you had some worries. Original. I dropped the contract onto his desk. This is my concern. His smile didn't waver. Ah, yes. The sale agreement. You mean the illegal sale agreement? His eyebrow twitched. The sale was completely above board. I leaned in. Then why does my grandfathers will say they couldn't sell it? Paraphrased. I put the contract on his desk. This is what I'm concerned about. His smile stayed in place. The sales agreement. I see. The illegal sales agreement, you mean. His eyebrow twitched. The sale was entirely legal. I leaned closer. Then why does my grandfather's will forbid them from selling it? Original, I expected him to falter, to hesitate, something, but instead he just sighed, like he was dealing with a child who didn't understand the rules. There was a clause in your grandfather's will, he admitted, but your parents acted under an emergency directive. The company was at risk. They had the legal right to... No, they didn't. I pulled out the copy of the will my lawyer had sent me the night before. Mr. Sun barely glanced at it. A will is subject to interpretation. Paraphrased. I expected him to hesitate or show some sign of doubt. Instead, he just sighed, as if talking to a child who didn't understand. There was a clause in your grandfather's will, he confessed, but your parents invoked an emergency directive because the company was in danger. They had the legal authority to... No, they didn't. I pulled out the will copy my lawyer had sent me the previous night. Mr. Sun gave it a quick look. A will can be interpreted in different ways. Original. I clenched my fists under the table. This was the game. Drag me into legal mud until I either drowned or gave up. Then he did something that made my blood boil. He smiled. Look, I understand you're upset, but your parents did what was necessary. I forced myself to breathe. Where's Jiang Wei? That caught him off guard. Excuse me. I tapped the contract. This sale wasn't just a business move. My father owed Jiang money, didn't he? Silence. I had him. Paraphrased. I made a fist under the table. This was their tactic, to exhaust me with legal back and forth until I quit. Then he did something that infuriated me. He smiled. Listen, I know you're angry, but your parents did what was required. I forced myself to stay calm. Where is Jiang Wei? The question surprised him. Excuse me? I pointed to the contract. This wasn't just a business deal. My father owed Jiang money, didn't he? He was silent. I had caught him. Original. I want a meeting, I said. Mr. Sun scoffed. You think Jiang Wei will meet with you? I stood up. He will. When he finds out my parents sold him something they didn't legally own. That wiped the smirk off his face. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? He asked, his voice low. Yeah, I said. Do they? I walked out before he could answer. I wasn't just going to fight this. I was going to burn the whole damn thing down. PARAPHRASED. I demand a meeting, I declared. Mr. Sun snorted. You think Jiang Wei will see you? I got to my feet. He will. Once he learns that my parents sold him something they had no legal right to. His smug smile disappeared. Do you have any idea who you're messing with? He asked in a low voice. I do, I replied. Do they? I left before he could respond. I wasn't just going to fight this. I was going to destroy it all. Original. I didn't wait for Mr. Sun to arrange a meeting. That would have given him time to spin the story, to warn my parents, to tighten their grip. No, I went straight to Jiang Wei's headquarters myself. His office was in a sleek high-rise building overlooking the Pearl River, the kind of place where power wasn't flaunted, it was assumed. The receptionist barely glanced at me before saying, Do you have an appointment? Paraphrased, I didn't wait for Mr. Sun to set up a meeting, as that would give him time to create a narrative, alert my parents, and strengthen their position. Instead, I went directly to Jiang Wei's office. His headquarters were in a modern skyscraper with a view of the Pearl River, the type of building where authority was a given, not something that had to be displayed. The receptionist barely looked at me before asking, Do you have an appointment? Original? No, I said. But tell him it's about the Guangzhou factory he just acquired that got her attention. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. He's not available, she said carefully. I smirked. I'll wait. She opened her mouth to argue, but then something behind me shifted. The air changed. Footsteps, controlled, deliberate. I turned. Jiang Wei himself stood in the doorway of the executive lounge, watching me like I was a curiosity. He was younger than I expected, maybe late 40s, in a dark suit that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. You have 5 minutes, he said. Paraphrased, no, I replied, but tell him I'm here to talk about the Guangzhou factory he recently bought. This caught her attention. Her fingers paused over the keyboard. He's not free, she said cautiously. I smiled. I'll wait. She started to object, but then the atmosphere behind me changed. I heard slow, purposeful footsteps. I turned and saw Jiang Wei himself standing in the doorway of the executive lounge, studying me with curiosity. He was younger than I expected, perhaps in his late 40s, and wore a dark suit that was likely more expensive than my entire college education. 5 minutes, he announced, original. I followed him into his office. A cavernous room lined with floor-to ceiling windows. The view screamed control. He gestured to a seat, but I didn't take it. I'm here about the sale of my grandfather's factory, I said. He sat down, adjusting his cufflinks. Your parents' factory, he corrected. I dropped the will onto his desk. Mine. He glanced at it, then at me, unimpressed. You came all this way to show me a piece of paper. I came to tell you that the sale was fraudulent. That got his attention. His fingers drummed against the desk. That's a serious accusation. Paraphrased. I walked into his office, a huge room with floor-to-ceiling windows that conveyed a sense of power. He motioned to a chair, but I didn't sit. I'm here about the sale of my grandfather's factory, I stated. He sat down and adjusted his cufflinks. Your parents' factory, he corrected me. I placed the will on his desk. Mine, I countered. He looked at the document, then at me, unimpressed. You traveled all this way just to show me a piece of paper. I came to inform you that the sale was illegal. This got his attention. He started to tap his fingers on the desk. That is a very serious claim. Original. It's not an accusation. It's a fact. I leaned forward. My parents had no legal right to sell it, which means you don't own it. A silence. Then he laughed, a slow, deliberate chuckle, like I had just told him the funniest joke in the world. You think a will is going to stop me? He said. I didn't blink. I think a lawsuit will. He smirked. Lawsuits take time, money, influence. I have all three. Do you? I clenched my jaw. Paraphrased. It's not an accusation, it's the truth. I leaned in. My parents couldn't legally sell it, which means you don't own it. There was a moment of silence, and then he left a slow, deliberate laugh, as if I had just said something hilarious. You think a will can stop me? He asked. I didn't flinch. I think a lawsuit can. He smiled faintly. Lawsuits require time, money, and power. I have all of those. Do you? I tightened my jaw. Original. Then he tilted his head. Your father didn't tell you, did he? The hairs on my neck stood up. Tell me what? Jiang leaned back, watching me, enjoying this. He didn't just sell the factory to pay off a debt. He offered it to me before he was even in trouble. My stomach dropped. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. The factory was profitable. Why would he? Then I saw it. The truth hit me like a freight train. My father hadn't sold the factory because he had to. He had sold it because he wanted to, because he never wanted me to have it in the first place. Paraphrased. Then he tilted his head. Your father never told you, did he? The hair on my neck stood up. Told me what? Jiang leaned back, observing me, clearly enjoying the moment. He didn't sell the factory to get out of debt. He offered it to me before he had any financial problems. My stomach sank. I shook my head. That can't be right. The factory was making money. Why would he? Then I understood. The truth hit me hard. My father didn't sell the factory out of necessity. He did it on purpose. He never wanted me to inherit it. Original. Jiang saw the realization dawn on my face and smiled. This was never about debt, he said. It was about keeping you out. I stood there, fists clenched, pulse roaring in my ears. Jiang folded his hands. So, tell me, now that you know the truth, what are you going to do? I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I damn well was going to find one. Paraphrased. Jiang saw the moment I understood and smiled. The debt was never the real reason, he said. The goal was to prevent you from getting the business. I stood there with my fists clenched, my heart pounding. Jiang folded his hands. Now that you know the truth, what is your next move? I didn't have an answer at that moment, but I was determined to find one. Original. I walked out of Ji Wei's office feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My father hadn't been forced into this deal. He had orchestrated it deliberately, methodically. He had chosen to strip me of my inheritance, to erase my grandfather's legacy, to make sure I was left with nothing. And Jiang Wei, he was just playing his role, watching from the throne my father had practically gifted him. Paraphrased. I left Jiang Wei's office feeling like the world had been pulled from under me. My father wasn't coerced into the deal. He had planned it carefully and intentionally. He had chosen to take away my inheritance, destroy my grandfather's legacy, and leave me with nothing. Jiang Wei was just a part of his scheme, ruling from the position my father had handed him. Original. I gritted my teeth. No. Not like this. I wasn't going to roll over and let them win. I needed leverage. By the time I reached Mr. Le's apartment, my head was pounding. I knocked twice before he opened the door, his eyes scanning my face. You found something, he said. It wasn't a question. I stepped inside. Jiang told me the sale wasn't about debt. My father never wanted me to have the business. Mr. Le's jaw tightened. Your grandfather suspected as much. Paraphrased. I clenched my jaw. This couldn't be it. I refused to give up and let them win. I needed something to use against them. By the time I got to Mr. Le's apartment, my head was throbbing. I knocked twice, and he opened the door, studying my expression. You found something, he said, not asking a question. I went inside. Jiang said the sale wasn't for debt. My father never wanted me to have the company. Mr. Lesja tensed. Your grandfather had a feeling that was the case. Original? I froze. What? He sighed, rubbing his temples. He never told me outright, but he had his doubts about your father. Said he was always looking for a way out, a way to turn the business into something it was never meant to be. I sank into the nearest chair. Why didn't he say anything? He did. He left it all in the will. I shook my head. The will wasn't enough. They sold it anyway. Paraphrased. I stopped. What did you say? He sighed, rubbing his temples. He never said it directly, but he didn't trust your father. He said your father was always looking for an easy way out, a way to change the business into something it wasn't. I sat down in the closest chair. Why didn't he tell me? He did. He put it all in the will. I shook my head. The will didn't matter. They sold it anyway. Original. Mr. Le nodded gravely. Then, after a pause, he stood and walked to an old wooden cabinet. He pulled out a small, locked box. Your grandfather was careful, he said, handing it to me. I looked at the box. It was heavy, solid. I ran my fingers over the top and noticed something. His initials engraved in gold. What's inside? Mr. Le handed me a key. The real insurance policy. Paraphrased. Mr. Le nodded seriously. After a moment, he got up and went to an old wooden cabinet. He took out a small locked box. Your grandfather was cautious, he said, giving it to me. The box felt heavy and strong. I ran my fingers over the top and saw something. His initials etched in gold. What's in it? I asked. Mr. La gave me a key. The true safety net. Original. I opened the box at a dimly lit cafe away from prying eyes. Inside were several folders neatly stacked, each one labeled in my grandfather's precise handwriting. I flipped through them. Bank statements, contracts, handwritten notes, and then I found it. A second contract, one that overrode the sale my parents had made. I scanned the document, my heart racing. It was signed, stamped, legally binding. My grandfather had anticipated this betrayal, and he had made sure there was a way to undo it. Paraphrased, away from anyone who might be watching, I opened the box in a dimly lit cafe. Inside, there were several well-organized folders, each one labeled in my grandfather's neat handwriting. I went through them. Bank statements, contracts, notes, ... and then I found it. A second contract. This one nullified the sale my parents had made. My heart pounded as I read the document. It was signed, stamped, and legally binding. My grandfather had foreseen this betrayal and had created a way to reverse it. Original. I gripped the paper. Adrenaline surging through me. I finally had something real. Something that could rip this whole deal apart. I grabbed my phone and called my lawyer. Do you trust me? I asked. A pause. Do you even have to ask? Good, I said, because we're about to start a war. Paraphrased. I held the paper tightly, a rush of energy running through me. I finally had a real weapon, something that could completely tear this deal apart. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Can I count on you? I asked. There was a pause. Is that even a question? Great, I said, because we're about to begin a fight. Original? I didn't go home that night. Home wasn't safe anymore. Instead, I checked into a small hotel near the river and spent hours poring over the documents my grandfather had left behind. My mind raced, fitting the pieces together. The real contract wasn't just a loophole. It was a landmine buried beneath everything my parents had done, because my grandfather hadn't just left me the business. He had made sure that if anyone tried to sell it without my consent, the deal would be null and void. Legally, the company still belonged to me. I could undo everything. I just had to be willing to go all the way. Paraphrased, I didn't go back to my house that night, as it no longer felt safe. I got a room at a small hotel by the river and spent hours studying the documents my grandfather had left. My mind was racing, putting everything together. The real contract was more than a technicality. It was a trap buried under my parents' actions. My grandfather hadn't simply left me the business. He had ensured that if anyone attempted to sell it without my approval, the deal would be legally invalid. The company was still mine. I could reverse everything they had done, but I had to be ready to see it through to the end. Original. The next morning, I walked into my parents' house like a man ready to burn the whole place down. My mother was in the sitting room, scrolling through her phone, like she didn't have a care in the world. My father was by the window, drinking his usual morning coffee. They barely looked up when I entered. I know what you did, I said, throwing the contract onto the coffee table. My father glanced at it, unimpressed. Oh, another piece of paper, paraphrased. The next morning, I entered my parents' house with the demeanor of someone ready to cause chaos. My mother was in the living room, scrolling through her phone as if she had no worries. My father was by the window, drinking his usual morning coffee. They hardly looked up when I came in. I know what you did, I said, tossing the contract onto the coffee table. My father looked at it with disinterest. Another piece of paper, he said. Original. I stepped closer. It's the piece of paper, the one that overrides the sale. That got his attention. His fingers tightened around the coffee cup. My mother finally looked up. Where did you get this? I smiled coldly. From the one person you idiots forgot about. Grandpa himself. My father's face darkened. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. No, I shot back. You don't. I leaned in, lowering my voice. I spoke to Jiang Wei. That made my mother sit up straighter. Paraphrased. I moved closer. This is the one that matters, the one that invalidates the sale. His attention was now fully on me, and his fingers gripped his coffee cup. My mother finally looked up. Where did you get that? I smiled a cold smile. From the one person you both ignored. Grandpa. My father's expression grew grim. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. No, I retorted. You don't? I leaned in and spoke softly. I talked to Jiang Wei. This caused my mother to sit up. Original. I nodded. Yeah? And you know what? He doesn't like being played. My father's jaw clenched. This is between us. You had no right to sell what wasn't yours, I snapped. And now Jiang's going to find out that the deal he made with you is about to collapse. A silence. I could see it in my father's eyes. The calculation, the fear, For the first time in my life, he was the one scrambling for control. Paraphrased, I nodded. Yes. And guess what? He doesn't like being deceived. My father's jaw tightened. This is a private matter. You had no right to sell something that wasn't yours, I interrupted. And now Jiang is about to learn that the deal he made with you is about to fall apart. There was a pause. I could see the panic in my father's eyes. He was finally losing his grip on the situation. Original. You have no idea what kind of man Zheng Wei is, my mother said quietly. I laughed. Oh, I know exactly what kind of man he is. That's why he's about to turn on you. The second he realizes you dragged him into an illegal deal. I watched the panic settle in. My father stood, pacing. Now, my mother's fingers twitched. This was it. This was the moment the tide turned. Paraphrased. You have no idea what kind of man Jiang Wei is, my mother said softly. I laughed. I know exactly who he is. That's why I know he's going to turn on you the moment he finds out you got him into an illegal deal. I saw the fear sink in. My father began to pace, and my mother's fingers started to twitch. This was the turning point. Original. Then my father stopped pacing. He turned to me, something dangerous in his expression. You think you've won, he said softly. I stared him down. No, but I think you've lost. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out. A message from my lawyer. Zheng wants to meet tonight, alone. My heartbeat quickened. I looked back at my father, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. Paraphrased, my father stopped pacing. He faced me, a menacing look on his face. You think you've won? He asked quietly. I met his gaze. No, but I think you have lost. Then my phone vibrated. I looked at the message from my lawyer. Jiang wants to meet tonight. Just you. My heart pounded. I looked back at my father and saw real fear in his eyes for the first time. Original. The air in Jiang Wei's private lounge was thick with cigar smoke and unspoken threats. The place wasn't a restaurant. Not really. It was where deals happened, where power shifted hands. A handful of men in suits sat at nearby tables, pretending not to listen. Zheng sat across from me, relaxed, sipping tea, like this was just another business meeting, but I could see it in his eyes. He was deciding whether to shake my hand or bury me. P-A-R-A. P-H-R-A-S-E-D. The private lounge of Jiang Wei was filled with the smell of cigar smoke and the weight of unspoken threats. It wasn't a restaurant, but a place where business was conducted and power was exchanged. A few men in suits were at other tables, pretending not to pay attention. Jiang was across from me, looking calm, sipping tea, as if it were a normal meeting. But in his eyes, I could tell he was deciding whether to partner with me or destroy me. Original. You're brave, he said finally, walking in here alone. I met his gaze. You wanted to meet, so let's talk. He smirked. All right, let's talk about how your father lied to me. I exhaled, keeping my voice steady. He didn't just lie. He sold you something he didn't own. You know what that means? Jiang studied me for a long moment. Then he placed his cup down carefully. It means I have a problem, he said. And I don't like problems. I nodded. So let's fix it. Paraphrased, You are brave, he finally said. Coming here by yourself. I held his gaze. You asked for a meeting? So let's talk. He smiled faintly. Fine. Let's discuss how your father deceived me. I exhaled and kept my voice level. He did more than lie. He sold you something that wasn't his. Do you understand what that implies? Jiang watched me for a long time, then carefully put his cup down. It means I have a complication, he said, and I don't like complications. I nodded. So let's solve it. Original. His expression didn't change, but I could feel the shift. A test. You're asking me to walk away from a deal worth millions, he said. No, I said, leaning in. I'm asking you to back the right deal. Zhang raised an eyebrow. I pulled out my grandfather's real contract and placed it on the table. This wipes out my father's deal. Legally, the factory is still mine. But I don't just want to take it back. I let the words hang for a second before delivering the hook. I want a partner. Paraphrased. His expression didn't change, but I could feel the atmosphere shift. It was a test. You're telling me to walk away from a multi-million-dollar deal? He said. No, I said, leaning in. I'm asking you to support the correct deal. Jiang raised an eyebrow. I took out my grandfather's real contract and put it on the table. This invalidates my father's deal. Legally, the factory is still my property, but I don't just want it back. I paused for a moment before dropping the key part. I want a partner. Original? A. Silence. Then the smallest flicker of interest in Jiang's eyes. You want me as a partner? I nodded. My grandfather built something great, but I know it needs to evolve. I don't just want to run it. I want to expand. And you're the kind of man who knows how to make that happen. I could see it now. The calculation, the weighing of risks and rewards. Jiang Wei didn't care about my family drama. He cared about power, opportunity, and I had just given him one. Paraphrased, silence. Then a hint of interest appeared in Jiang's eyes. You want me to be your partner? I nodded. My grandfather built a great company, but I know it needs to grow. I don't just want to manage it, I want to expand it. And you're the person who can make that happen. I could see him thinking, weighing the potential outcomes. Jiang Wei didn't care about my family's issues. He cared about power and chance, and I had just presented him with one original. Finally, he smiled. You're smarter than your father, he said. I smirked. That's not exactly a high bar. Zhang chuckled, then leaned back. All right, let's say I'm interested. What happens to your father? I met his gaze head on. That's up to you. Jiang studied me, then slowly nodded. I like you, he said. You know how to play the game? He extended his hand. I shook it, and just like that, my parents were finished. Paraphrased. He finally smiled. You're much smarter than your father, he said. I smirked. That's not a difficult thing to be. Jiang laughed, then sat back. Okay, let's say I'm on board. What happens to your father? I looked him straight in the eyes. That's your call. Jiang looked at me, then slowly nodded, I like you, he said. You understand how to play the game. He offered his hand. I shook it. And just like that, my parents were defeated. Original by the time I left Jangwei's lounge. The city felt different, sharper, like the air itself had shifted in my favor. I had just done what my father never could. I had made a deal with Jing on my terms, and now my parents were about to feel what it was like to lose everything. Paraphrased, when I walked out of Jungwei's lounge, the city felt different and more alive, as if everything had turned in my favor. I had achieved something my father never could. I had struck a deal with Jiang on my own terms. And now, my parents were about to experience what it felt like to lose everything. Original. I didn't give them a warning. I wanted them to feel it. When I walked back into their house the next morning, my father was already on the phone, pacing, frantic. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, eyes locked on the contract I had left the night before. They knew. I took my time pouring a cup of tea, savoring the silence before I dropped the bomb. Paraphrased. I didn't give them any warning. I wanted them to feel the impact directly. The next morning, when I returned to their house, my father was already pacing and panicking on the phone. My mother was sitting rigidly on the sofa, staring at the contract I had left behind the previous night. They knew what was coming. I slowly poured myself a cup of tea, enjoying the quiet before I gave them the bad news. Original. I spoke to Jiang. My father stopped pacing. My mother finally looked up. He's not happy, I continued. Turns out people don't like being dragged into illegal deals. My father's face was pale now. What did you do? I smiled. What you should have done. I made an offer. He shook his head, almost laughing. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. No, I shot back. You don't. I leaned in. Jiang and I have a deal now. He's backing me. The factory, it's mine again. Paraphrased. I talked to Jiang. I said, my father stopped pacing, and my mother looked up. He's not pleased, I went on. Apparently, people don't like being roped into illegal deals. My father's face was pale. What have you done? I smiled. I did what you should have done. I made him an offer. He shook his head, a hint of a laugh in his voice. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. No, I retorted. You don't. I leaned in. Jiang and I have a new deal. He's supporting me now. The factory, it's mine again. Original. A silence. Then my father's voice dropped. You don't understand how business works. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you sold out your own father's legacy because you were afraid of being overshadowed. His jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. I turned to my mother. And you let him? You both did. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't look away. I exhaled, letting the weight of it settle. It's over. You lost. Paraphrased. Silence fell. Then my father's voice became quiet. You have no idea how business works. On the contrary, I understand it completely, I said. I understand that you sold your own father's legacy because you were scared of being overshadowed by him. His jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. I looked at my mother, and you went along with it. Both of you. She pressed her lips together, but maintained eye contact. I exhaled. letting the full weight of the moment sink in. It's finished. You've lost. Original. My father scoffed, trying to regain control. You think Jiang Wei is your friend? He'll chew you up and spit you out. I smirked. Maybe. But at least I'm sitting at the table. He had nothing left to say. I finished my tea, set the cup down, and turned to leave. But before I walked out, I glanced back. Oh, and one more thing, I added. Jiang's sending someone over later. You might want to be home for that. My father's face went slack. My mother inhaled sharply. I didn't wait to see the fallout. I had a factory to run. Paraphrased, my father let out a scoff, attempting to regain his composure. You really think Jiang Wei is on your side? He'll use you and discard you. I smiled. Maybe, but at least I'm part of the game. He had no reply. I finished my tea, put the cup down, and started to leave. But before I walked out, I looked back one more time. Oh, one more thing. I said, Jiang is sending someone over later today. You might want to be here for it. My father's face went blank. My mother gasped. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I had a factory to run. Original. Finally, he smiled. You're smarter than your father, he said. I smirked. That's not exactly a high bar. Zhang chuckled, then leaned back. All right, let's say I'm interested. What happens to your father? I met his gaze head on. That's up to you. Jiang studied me, then slowly nodded. I like you, he said. You know how to play the game? He extended his hand. I shook it, and just like that, my parents were finished. Paraphrased. He finally smiled. You're much smarter than your father, he said. I smirked. That's not a difficult thing to be. Jiang laughed, then sat back. Okay, let's say I'm on board. What happens to your father? I looked him straight in the eyes. That's your call. Jiang looked at me, then slowly nodded. I like you, he said. You understand how to play the game. He offered his hand. I shook it, and just like that, my parents were defeated. Original by the time I left Jiang Wei's lounge. The city felt different, sharper, like the air itself had shifted in my favor. I had just done what my father never could. I had made a deal with Jing on my terms, and now my parents were about to feel what it was like to lose everything. Paraphrased, when I walked out of Jiang Wei's lounge, the city felt different and more alive, as if everything had turned in my favor. I had achieved something my father never could. I had struck a deal with Jiang on my own terms. And now, my parents were about to experience what it felt like to lose everything. Original. I didn't give them a warning. I wanted them to feel it. When I walked back into their house the next morning, my father was already on the phone, pacing, frantic. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, eyes locked on the contract I had left the night before. They knew. I took my time pouring a cup of tea, savoring the silence before I dropped the bomb. Paraphrased. I didn't give them any warning. I wanted them to feel the impact directly. The next morning, when I returned to their house, my father was already pacing and panicking on the phone. My mother was sitting rigidly on the sofa, staring at the contract I had left behind the previous night. They knew what was coming. I slowly poured myself a cup of tea, enjoying the quiet before I gave them the bad news. Original, I spoke to Jiang. My father stopped pacing. My mother finally looked up. He's not happy, I continued. Turns out people don't like being dragged into illegal deals. My father's face was pale now. What did you do? I smiled. What you should have done. I made an offer. He shook his head, almost laughing. You have no idea what you've just stepped into. No, I shot back. You don't. I leaned in. Jiang and I have a deal now. He's backing me. The factory, it's mine again. Paraphrased. I talked to Jiang. I said, my father stopped pacing, and my mother looked up. He's not pleased, I went on. Apparently, people don't like being roped into illegal deals. My father's face was pale. What have you done? I smiled. I did what you should have done. I made him an offer. He shook his head, a hint of a laugh in his voice. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. No, I retorted. You don't. I leaned in. Jiang and I have a new deal. He's supporting me now. The factory, it's mine again. Original. A silence. Then my father's voice dropped. You don't understand how business works. Oh, I understand perfectly, I said. I understand that you sold out your own father's legacy because you were afraid of being overshadowed. His jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. I turned to my mother. And you let him? You both did. Her lips pressed together, but she didn't look away. I exhaled, letting the weight of it settle. It's over. You lost. Paraphrased. Silence fell. Then my father's voice became quiet. You have no idea how business works. On the contrary, I understand it completely, I said. I understand that you sold your own father's legacy because you were scared of being overshadowed by him. His jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. I looked at my mother, and you went along with it. Both of you. She pressed her lips together, but maintained eye contact. I exhaled, letting the full weight of the moment sink in. It's finished. You've lost. Original. My father scoffed, trying to regain control. You think Jiang Wei is your friend? He'll chew you up and spit you out. I smirked. Maybe. But at least I'm sitting at the table. He had nothing left to say. I finished my tea, set the cup down, and turned to leave. But before I walked out, I glanced back. Oh, and one more thing, I added. Jiang's sending someone over later. You might want to be home for that. My father's face went slack. My mother inhaled sharply. I didn't wait to see the fallout. I had a factory to run. Paraphrased. My father let out a scoff, attempting to regain his composure. You really think Jiang Wei is on your side? He'll use you and discard you. I smiled. Maybe, but at least I'm part of the game. He had no reply. I finished my tea, put the cup down, and started to leave. But before I walked out, I looked back one more time. Oh, one more thing. I said Jiang is sending someone over later today. You might want to be here for it. My father's face went blank. My mother gasped. I didn't stay to see what happened next. I had a factory to run.